Колеги, вітання. Ми продовжимо робочу.
Greetings. We continue our working day. The next press briefing is the path to victory, nonviolent struggle against the occupation. Our speakers are General Director of Kyiv International Institute of Sociology, Volodymyr Paniotto, Pavlo, Zhovnirenko, Chairman of the Center for Strategic Studies, and Dmytro Potekhin, Head of the Agency of Nonviolent Solutions. We are planning to tell about the results of the survey done by Kyiv International Institute of Sociology in September, from 31st of August till 13th of September 2015. And those who were ordering the survey, they will tell why they have ordered it and their results. I will talk about the methodology of the survey. The survey was done on all the territory of Ukraine, with the exception of Crimea. We were using telephone interviews, computer-assisted telephone interviews. The interviews were done on the occupied territory of Donetsk region and Lugansk, on the territory of Donbass, on occupied territory of Donbass, and on non-occupied territory we were using the random selection of phone numbers, and it was two-stage selection. At the first stage, we classified according to the region and the type of settlement, and the second was the quota selection, and we interviewed 1,000 respondents. We used the database of stationary phone numbers, so we had two errors because we were using just the general error is not more than 5%, should not be more than 5%. So you're welcome. Good afternoon, Dmytro Potekhin. The main results are somewhat more Ukrainians believe that the methods of nonviolent struggle can be used, and they could be more efficient than the armed methods of fighting against occupation. You see the graph, that is the main result, not the only result. We will tell you about other results in more detail later, but that's the major result. And this result probably is strange for Ukraine, but I would like to say that the research made, the surveys made in the world about efficiency of the methods of fighting against dictatorship and occupants also demonstrate the same trend. More than that, the survey of efficiency of the campaign means that nonviolent campaigns are twice more efficient than the campaigns of the struggle using the armaments. Also, the survey made based on the database of the conflicts during the last 100 years certified to these figures. We requested the Kyiv International Institute of Sociology, and we are grateful that they have done that survey. They managed to interview not just the respondents in the free part of Ukraine, but the respondents in the occupied part of Ukraine. And despite the war, the majority, a little more, Ukrainians are convinced that there is a sense to fight without use of violence. Why is that important? Historically, Ukraine had the examples of efficient armed fighting and more efficient fighting against dictators without weapons. You know that Ukraine received independence in the result of the revolution, which was non-violent revolution, and Orange Revolution demonstrated the ability of Ukrainians to oppose the attempt of Yanukovych to take the whole power in the country. Then the reforms were not that successful, but the attempt to stop seizing the power in 2004 was successful. Despite the war, most part, more Ukrainians believe that there's sense to engage into non-violent struggle. Then there are more of such Ukrainians than those who believe that violent methods are efficient. The regional results are very much different. Those people who live in conditions of war and for who violence has become everyday life, they believe that it is impossible to fight against weapons without violence. On the occupied territories, these figures are different. Fewer people believe that a non-violent struggle could be efficient. At the same time, we asked in what conditions should Ukraine start liberating the east and the south of Ukraine and the Crimea. And some people definitely say that these attempts are going on, but very few people said that. Some people stated that only when the citizens of these residents of these territories start opposing, either with weapons or without weapons. But in both cases, for most of respondents, it was important that the residents of the territories demonstrate that they are not satisfied with the occupation, and that's natural. I would finish on that. We can discuss the figures in detail later. There's a report which has the results of the survey with all the figures, and you can get the detailed report by email or here. Pavlo, Zhovnirenko, I would like to clarify so that you don't wait for the figures. There's the report, you can see it on the website of KIIS. The infographics is in LigaNet. If you have problems with searching for these materials after the press conference, I will give you my contact numbers and we will send it to you. I would like just to show here, this is just one question that was asked. There were more questions. What actions do citizens of Ukraine prefer in case of foreign occupation? 23%, 23.8% is select armed fight. 26 believe that strikes and marches should be used. So we see that in principle the difference is small, but more people are ready to participate in non-armed campaigns of struggle. What that means, there is a category of people who are ready to take arms, who know how to use it, There's the category of people who will not take weapons, maybe these because of religion, because the person doesn't know how to use weapons. But all of them have the intention to oppose, to resist. You need to add up these figures. We will not be able to convince all those who are ready to resist with arms that the most efficient is non-violent way, or those who are for non-violent struggle, we will not convince them to take arms in hands. Why we requested the KIIS to conduct that survey? You know, the role of citizens in Ukraine is in liberating from dictatorship. Now the dictatorship comes from outside of Ukraine and starts occupying the territory of Ukraine. Article 17 of the Constitution of Ukraine says that the protection of the and defense of the territorial integrity of Ukraine is the main function of the state and of the whole Ukrainian people. The law of Ukraine on the foundations of the national security from 2003, the subjects of ensuring national security are defined besides the President, the Verkhovna Rada and state bodies in the end. The citizens of Ukraine and associations of citizens. Unfortunately, the new version of military doctrine of Ukraine, which was approved in September 2015 by the President of Ukraine, the role of the citizens and the associations of the citizens are not there as the subjects. They have been missed. So if, for example, Item 50 of military doctrine, it says the main role in ensuring military security of Ukraine lies with the citizens of Ukraine. Now the structures of the sector of defense and security also participate, and we see what are the components of the defense and security sector: the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, National Guards, State Border Service, and so on. The Emergency Situation Special Service of Transportation, and so on. And the military industrial complex. There are no citizens or associations of citizens, and that is, Ukrainians demonstrated during the first stage of revolution of dignity, how important it was for citizens to oppose the power. Lithuania, in January this year, the Ministry of Defense and Department of Civil Security published the special document, so-called guidebook, What Should You Know About the Readiness to the Emergency Situation. And there's the whole section about the role of citizens in the defense of Ukraine. There are such things as they enumerate the crimes from the Criminal Code of Lithuanian Republic. And they have also the subsection, the tasks for civil defense. These are tasks for the citizens. To not to allow aggressor to achieve the objectives, not to create the occupational administration, and so on and so forth. To weaken military and administrative potential of aggressor. And then what the citizen should be doing if there is a threat of civil war or anything else. This Lithuanian textbook was just published in Lithuanian. They didn't have it in English or in Russian. We translated that into Ukrainian. And we are planning to, well, take that research, that survey, that booklet. We are planning to use it so that we can prepare the Ukrainian book on nonviolent struggle against the violence and occupation. We were collecting the examples in Crimea and in Donetsk and Lugansk regions, the campaigns. There are examples, different examples, mostly use of national colors, Ukrainian. In Crimean markets, they have the code. If a person comes with, for example, a pen which is yellow and blue, or some bracelet, if the person has yellow and blue colors, and you come to in the market to a salesperson that has similar things, then the prices will be even different. There was in Ilovaisk the competition of children's drawings. The administration, DNA administration, said that the painting will win, that will get most of the votes of those who came. The first place was a painting of a girl in the yellow field and the blue sky, and someone said that these are colors of Ukrainian flag, but then the participants said, but these were conditions of the competition, we all voted for that. There's a guy, there's an old person who sells Ukrainian symbols in Donetsk. I checked that twice, and they were trying to exercise some pressure on them, and he says, that's my business, I live from it. There are examples when the drivers passing the checkpoints from Crimea to Ukraine, the driver who before that was indifferent, he did not care what was there, when he comes to the checkpoint immediately he turns on Ukrainian songs of the Sichevi Streltsy, of the Cossacks songs. So I will not enumerate everything, but all these examples, they will become the integral part of our guidebook, of our book, like 180 methods. Eugene Sharpa, who's the guru of nonviolent struggle, of nonviolent resistance. Ukrainians have added to these methods. There will be little more of such methods. This is it. Thank you. No questions. Please clarify it again. This survey, the results are already on the website. It's not our website. It's the website of Kyiv International Institute of Sociology, and it's on the site Liganet as infographics. And you can give us this report. We will be writing the press release and we'll include it into our press release. Now, the questions. Any questions from journalists? Speak into the mic, please. Current form. Could you clarify when are you planning to publish it, this booklet? We have translated. We were translating this Lithuanian. I do have it here. I'm not making it public. We want it all to be in one place. But I believe that this booklet, well, by the end of November, you will be informed on Facebook, and will come here again. And if we manage to publish it, we will bring it. If not, we will give you the resource from which you can download it. From the moment when in Ukraine, even on the occupied territories, quarter of the population are users of internet, that's not the problem, but we'll be disseminating it by other methods. I don't want to talk about them. Psychologist Viktor Pushkar, you mentioned that there are methods of non-violent resistance described by Sharp, and there are things which could add, which Ukrainians could add in the result of 2013-2014. Will they be presented in your publication, or maybe there should be a separate publication made, the Ukrainian experience of the last years? Basically, I believe that as my scientific school taught me, I don't think that we need to mix up Gen Sharp with the Ukrainian and Lithuanian. We will give what they have prepared, but our booklet will have our examples and the one who reads it. The main thing is to provide alternative to those who read, who want to participate. One wants to understand, another one wants to participate. That is long-term. This is not just directed towards overcoming occupation. The methods are the same to overcome dictatorship. I believe that it will be even good Thank you. One more for a question from UCMC. Why didn't you do that in the occupied territory of Crimea, but you did it in Donbass? And how much the answers of those who live on the occupied territory, how much did they differ from those which were not on the occupied territory? We would like to have it on the whole territory, but because Kyiv International Institute of Sociology is the organization which is quite responsible when they make the survey, they could not guarantee the quality of interviews in Crimea. We requested to do it at a high quality where possible. As to methodology, Volodymyr. With Crimea, we had more problems. Now, if you need this to do the interviews in Crimea, we have to do it with the assistance of Russian centers. We cooperate with Levada Center, but that would be much more expensive and difficult, talking about time frame. We really placed an order, but we don't have any funding from. We wanted to make the product.
Зовсім інші, ніж якби ми проводили це в Криму. Тому це одна з причин.
Можливо, додам.
I will add maybe that's not a new method, but for Ukraine that was an event which means that the residents of Donbass want to be liberated. That's a case of Sergei Nazarov, a person who was not afraid of the terrorists and placed the cartoons of the leaders of terrorist regime in Donetsk. He was risking his life. He was arrested twice for that, but his non-violent resistance did not stop there. He used now the opportunity of local elections, and he put himself as a candidate to mayors of Mariupol, the territory which is controlled by Yanukovych's regime. I came back from Mariupol. I spent there more than a week. That's the territory where if you invite to TV station, they request you to say nothing bad about Russia. Now, not 2-3 years ago, but today. And Sergei used his experience in order to tell, at least in private meetings online, what could happen with Mariupol if the citizens vote for people who practically support the DNR regime. And the paradox is that many people, and it's not just in Mariupol, not just in the east or south of Ukraine, but in the rest of Ukraine, they don't know that in Donetsk there are concentration camps. We do know that there are people who are persecuted, who are killed, but somehow we are not talking about that. We are not talking about that as about concentration camps, which are organized not by separatists but by terrorists. In mass media, Western media continue to call those people who are terrorists, who organized in Donetsk concentration camps, we call them rebels. But rebels, we had rebels in Maidan, the rebels against Yanukovych regime. But in Donetsk, in Lugansk, in Crimea, these are not rebels, these are terrorists and pro-Russian Nazis who have not organized gas chambers just because they are not so good managers as German Nazis, but these are concentration camps. The Day newspaper, I know that there are several groups who developed the concept of national security in RPI and Maidan of Foreign Affairs. Do you contact with them? Do they receive these materials? Because we see that in the doctrine misses some of the sections. I believe that the access of people to certain methods of fighting dictatorship will be limited. We are open for cooperation. That's a requirement of any serious survey. That's access to sources. As to the concept and doctrine, Pavlo has mentioned that. I would add that the level of preparation of these documents is very low. State documents. It's not that non-violent resistance is not part of the military doctrine. This is not such a big problem that the citizens are not included. It is up to citizens. And what is not prohibited by law, what is not described in the concept, could be done by citizens and organizations that you mentioned, and our coalition. We are doing that. The problem is indifferent. First, that's not understanding by people who define state policy what is non-violent resistance. Then in the military doctrine, despite the fact that it's called the military, there's no description of what's happening, and that Russia is conducting war against Ukraine. There are no words like that. They talk about information war. They mention special operations, but they don't have the war of Russia against Ukraine. There's an impression that there's only information war going on. We understand by who, against who, but It doesn't mention that this is a war. Those who were in the east, they know that that is the war. Those who were fighting, they know that is the war. Mothers, parents, relatives of military who did not return, they know that this is the war. But the military doctrine of Ukraine doesn't have words. The war of Russia against Ukraine, why is it important? Besides the fact that this is distortion of the reality. You can just guess about the reason, but this impacts forming the state policy. For example, this discussion of sanctions against Russia, restricting the communication by airlines. If we, the citizens of Ukraine, knew clearly that it's about war, then certain things that would seem for us to be unacceptable in conditions of war would be understood by the citizens of Ukraine as temporary circumstances which are to be overcome. But not trying to hide the war, not trying to come to an agreement with the occupants and aggressor, but developing military and non-military methods of overcoming the occupation. The lack of realistic assessment leads to non-realistic plans and delay and expanding the war in time. They don't use the word war, they are talking about aggression of Russian Federation and military conflict. But the military doctrine is somewhat pacifistic. I understand that's not the topic of our press conference, just to confirm what Dmytro was talking about. One example. Article 32 of the military doctrine as the basis for crisis reaction. Ukraine considers such main actions use of the possibilities of NATO and other structures, and then introducing military situation in the country. It's in the end. I wouldn't like to say that the leadership of the country does not understand how important non-violent resistance is. Let's recollect the speech of the President Poroshenko on the 1st of July 2014. I address every citizen of Donetsk and Lugansk regions. Yes, you cannot oppose these bandits physically, but your power of will and spirit, your civil protest against the so-called public republics, intolerance of those who are terrorists will approach the day when your houses and your streets will have this stable peace. 1st of July 2014, the President Poroshenko. But these are words, and that's about military doctrine. Thank you. On this patriotic note, we will finish and see you again in our UCMC. That was the last briefing for today.
На нашому сайті в рубриці «Розклад».